Welcome to all of you for joining us for another episode of the Nonprofit Show. It is Tuesday. That's what my phone just told me. So I know it's going to go by so quickly, but we always like to thank our presenting sponsors before we start our episode. And so you can see their logos on the screen in front of you. We are so grateful to their investment, not only into the show, but the conversation at large. These are really national sponsors and supporters of the great work and good that you are doing in your community. So thank you to our presenting sponsors. And thank you to Julia for having this wild, kooky idea back in the middle of March to say, hey, I think we should do this amazing show. And here we are in 230 plus episodes since the middle of March. So Julia Patrick is the CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. I have the great honor of serving alongside Julia as a co-host. I'm Jarrett Ransom, CEO of the Raven Group, also known as the Nonprofit Nerd. And I am so excited to have our guest with us today. Look at that logo. Like, if that is not speaking to my soul, right? The mindful techie. I'm going to have to pull this out because I don't know if you've seen these, but yeah, I love to nerd out with glasses. So I wish I had thought of this amazing logo, but mindful techie. And I hope I say your name correctly. Is it Meico?
Meico.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be a part of the conversation and talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, especially for the change makers or the nonprofit folks. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome.
It's really cool. I think that so many of us, because of this pandemic, were thrown into an environment where we really had to adopt technology more quickly and more assertively than maybe we thought we needed to be, or that we were on track to be. And I know that for a lot of folks, this has become a really stressful thing. And so I love that you acknowledge the aspect of being mindful and the whole concept of tech life and then work life. And so I can't wait to have this conversation with you because I think we can all feel it, but I don't know if we can identify it.
Yes, absolutely.
So go ahead and tell us how you got into this.
So I come to this as a change maker. I've worked in the nonprofit space and the government space most of my professional career. My focus has been on communications and technology. I actually started off as sort of a tech whiz, helping people fix their computers and that kind of thing, and ended up being a software developer and web developer, really helping organizations that needed support in those areas. And over my career, one of the things I noticed is that we tend to be really passionate about the work that we do in the sector, so much so that sometimes we give our whole selves and we have nothing left over for anything or anyone else. And I recognize that with peers and colleagues. I saw that with myself. I had my own challenges with that, with burnout and in really facing a really serious health challenge. And that was a wake-up call for me where I realized that I didn't want to drop dead literally from overwork and to have my legacy be that, oh, he was really good at answering emails and managing projects. And that really caused me to think about, okay, what do I want my legacy to be beyond just the work that I'm doing? And I began to examine my sphere of influence and realized that I couldn't change the culture of the organization overnight, but I could, influence my team, which I was managing, began to have frank conversations about wellness, what people were doing to take care of themselves at work, outside of work, began to talk about it at conferences. And one of those short 5-minute talks at the Nonprofit Technology Conference many years ago, that the response to that was just so overwhelming and unexpected. And I realized from that moment that, okay, this was something that I'm really, not only is this something I'm really excited and passionate about, but there's a need broader than just what I saw for myself and for my team. And people are willing to pay me to help them with this. So let's make this work.
I love it. So then walk us through what imbalance looks like, a tech imbalance.
Absolutely. So one of the biggest things that we see when we look at symptoms of imbalance has to do with something I call IDD, or intention deficit disorder. So most folks have probably heard of ADD or ADHD, but what I'm talking about is intention deficit disorder, or where we lack clarity about why it is that we are doing the work that we're doing at a particular moment, why it is that we have woken up that particular morning. And for many of us, we lack that clarity. And so we're moving through life on autopilot, right? So we wake up, we're diving into our emails first thing in the morning. We're reacting to the notifications on our phones. We're reacting to the email inbox, which is essentially everyone else's to-do list for you. That's not your agenda. That's everyone else's to-do list and agenda for you. And so one of the hallmarks of this imbalance is if you find yourself in a situation where you're constantly reacting to what your technology is prompting you to do, or you're reacting to what other people or what the world is giving to you. We see the same thing with social media, with the news. You're allowing the news and social media to dictate how you feel and how you think about the world. As we were just talking about the weather, for example, and how that makes people feel. That's a very real impact, right? Are you choosing to accept that narrative, or do you have your own narrative and agenda that you're using to go about your work in your world?
Okay.
I know, and I'm guilty, right? And I even say to myself, do not check your phone first thing in the morning, right? But guess what? I do. I end up doing that, and it really is hard. And so I love this intention deficit disorder. So is that scientific? Because I have never heard that.
It's a term that I use, so I can't speak to whether or not the social scientists have said it as a thing, but it's a term that I use to describe the work that I do, because mindfulness is at the core of what I focus on, and intention is the genesis for everything that we do. So without that intention, without that, it's sort of like driving around and trying to use your GPS, but you haven't plugged in an address, right? And so you're just moving around. Like, you're busy, you're burning gas, and you can come home and say, like, yeah, you went X amount of miles, but did you actually arrive at any particular destination that was actually useful or impactful for you?
You are speaking to my soul.
Yeah. Meico, this is so interesting because how many of us could ever say that we are clean and unburdened from this? I mean, I think what happens is you're consumed by the process, or you're consumed by the influences, and you never really step back and look at the process. So
Yes.
How do we even start to find balance?
Yeah, so that the first place to start with any type of long-term sustained change is taking a moment to just pause and to, and there's a two-part process. So that you're pausing, but then you want to raise your awareness about what's actually happening. And when I work with clients, when I work with organizations and teams, one of the first things that I do is I help people to just take a moment to pause. You would be surprised the number of people that are going throughout their days and their weeks, and we do a simple breathing exercise, and they tell me, this is the first time that I've actually taken an opportunity to pause. I've been going nonstop since I woke up this morning, right? And so something as simple as just taking a few moments to pause can have a tremendous impact, right? And in that pausing, then we can begin to we can begin to assess, and I have assessment tools. I have a fun quiz that I'll share with folks. People can get access to afterwards to assess where they are and figure out what steps they need to take to move forward. But the next step in this process is you have to raise your awareness about where you are. And once you understand where you are on the spectrum, you take the quiz that we'll talk about later, then you want to be able to get clear about what is it that you actually really want, right? Not what other people are telling you via the emails and the text messages and the social media posts, but what is it that you actually want for your personal life? Do you want to be a good mother? Do you want to be a good father? Want to be a good partner? How do you want to show up in that lens? And then what kind of person do you actually want to be in the professional context, right? What kind of impact do you want to have for your clients, for your colleagues, et cetera? And then over time, you align your priorities with those intentions. For many of us, we haven't taken the time to get clear about those. And so it's sort of fuzzy. right? So we think we know, and we are moving on autopilot, and it just becomes this nonstop hamster wheel where we're busy, we're exhausted, we're checking things off the list, we're answering emails, but is it actually adding up to real impact? And that's what I really want folks to focus on.
That is really important. We talk a lot about, we react to so many things. And that is exactly what you were saying. When we wake up in the morning, we check our email, we look at the news, and we're reacting then to what someone else has put on our to-do list,
Yes.
Not focusing on our own to-do list.
Yes.
And really, as I had shared yesterday in my goal setting and leadership conversation, it's also about what have we accomplished, right? Let's celebrate what we have accomplished and not focus on everyone else's tasks that they've put on our list.
Yes.
So yes, this is so timely, especially, and I would love for you to talk about this. I feel like our society at large, right, has definitely increased the digital presence,
Yes.
especially during the pandemic. But it's this digital world, everything is now digital. There's a lot more virtual meetings. There's a lot more apps. There's a lot more, you name it, it's out there. So how are you finding, that balance when it comes to an increase of these technology?
Yeah, so I think the first place to start is just by acknowledging that technology is a great tool. So this is not about bashing technology.
Sure.
This is not about bashing people that are out there doing great work. That the work that we're doing is important. The technology that helps us facilitate that work professionally and also in the personal life is great. What we're talking about is how do we find a balanced or mindful and intentional way to use it in a way that serves us as opposed to, we're serving it, right? We're reacting to it. So I think that's really the first place that we start in this conversation. And the second thing I would say is that we have to really set ourselves up for success. And so one of the first things we can do is even starting before the next day starts is that at night, we have a bedtime for ourselves. How many of us actually have a bedtime for our devices, right? How many of us have actually say, okay, a half hour before bedtime, which is, I think what some of the research shows that, essentially taking our attention away from the screen so that we can have uninterrupted sleep at night. How many of us are actually taking that opportunity to set ourselves up for success and to perhaps even charge your device in another room if you're one of those people that grabs your phone first thing in the morning, right? So that's one simple thing that we can do. You can do this as an individual. You can do this as a family. You all can agree, have a centralized charging station in your home where you agree, okay, well, if we're going to bed at 11, then 10:30 is the bedtime for the devices or whatever the timing is that actually works for you. And then that sets you up to wake up that next morning and you have a bit more clarity and spaciousness because your device isn't the first thing that you're grabbing. And there's so much, there's recent research that shows that even the presence of your phone is a distraction unconsciously, even if you aren't interacting with it. Like, I think for many of us, maybe you've been out and you've at a restaurant and people put their phones on the table face down. Even that, having it out on the table in that way is an unconscious distraction because you're having the conversation, but your mind is sort of unconscious thinking, okay, well, like, what if I have a text message? What if a call comes in? Like, what do I do? How do I respond? Did I respond to that email? There's that unconscious attachment that we have to our devices.
Yeah. Wow. It's really, I love that you say that, the bedtime for technology, because I think a lot of times, I did this last night with a client. I actually thought of something, I emailed them, never expecting them to respond until this morning. And then they responded and it was late. I mean, it was 9:30 and I felt so badly. And I was going to start to say, oh, I'm sorry I interrupted your evening. We'll talk about this tomorrow. But then I thought, hello, that's just a continuation of the problem, And so I love that, that you're saying that. I want to know about being mindful with technology and being mindful with your coworkers, because it seems to me that because we're not being able to meet at the water cooler or for lunch or in the parking lot of our agencies and our campuses, that we're having to communicate now more frequently on our devices. And so it just seems like it's compounding the problem. And I'm wondering if this is something that as a group, what would be a strategy?
Yes.
So
a few thoughts about this. The first is, again, I'm all about context, right? And I tell people, like, the fact of the matter, I think the Canadian government said this initially at the top of the pandemic, is that we're not really working from home. We're not really homeschooling. We're at home during a crisis trying to get work done. And so we have to acknowledge that this is not the typical work from home scenario.
right.
And what that means is that we have to be kind and compassionate with ourselves and patient with ourselves, and be kind and compassionate with our colleagues. I think that's the first place that we start. The second, which is a more practical thing, is that we have to really get on the same page about expectations about availability. And so I have something that I call the rules of engagement, where I work with teams to really work through a worksheet where we're just having a conversation about, okay, well, what are the expectations about when we're actually going to be available? Like, which hours are we expecting people to be available, right? How are we going to communicate, right? If something is urgent versus non-urgent, which tools, which channels are we actually using to communicate? And then what are our expectations in terms of response times, right? So many of us, we are operating on unwritten assumptions, and we're stressing ourselves out and we're stressing our teams out. But what if you could have a situation where you agree, for example, with your team that email is a non-urgent form of communication, the expectation is that people are going to respond within 24 to 48 hours. Otherwise, if something is really urgent, then you have permission to call me or to send a text message. Like, how much would that do to lower the collective anxiety that we have about you stepping away to have lunch, to walk the dog, to go change the diaper, to have lunch with your partner, to go for a walk during the middle of the day, and not feel like you are a slacker or you're letting your team down? That basic, just having a conversation and level setting and having sort of a common set of expectations can do wonders to really help us to work more seamlessly in a time where we're actually more dependent on technology perhaps than we've ever been before.
So communicating those rules of engagement, what I'm hearing you say, is really important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Establishing and communicating those. Yes.
I love that. And I don't know if I've heard of anyone talking about that. I don't know, Jarrett, it seems like, you always give the word balance, you move it to blend, and understanding how, you balance and blend and navigate all these things. But I don't know. I think that that's really an interesting frame that I haven't heard any organizations do. I mean, I know a lot of folks that are using Slack kind of as the, I'm here. And so they turn themselves on, in essence, that they're, available, they're open, as a way to kind of show their team that they're on and they're working. Not that you can really see necessarily where they are, what they're doing, but it's that almost accountability piece.
But even that, I feel like it's that constant, if I don't respond right away, then where are you? And still provides that check-in of, I just sent you a direct message or instant message, whatever. Why is it taking you so long? And it's like, come on, I was in the bathroom, even if you were walking the dog.
Exactly. And I think it's about, again, having those conversations about the rules of engagement, but also being able to have a clear sort of understanding about how you are monitoring whether people are actually, working on what they're working on, right? So that you have a regular check-in, are using a project management software where people are sort of checking off and providing status updates, things of that nature. Are people openly sharing their calendars so that you understand that I'm not responding to your text message because I'm literally in an interview right now. I can't respond to your text message or to your Slack message, right? Are we having those open conversations and sharing of what's happening such that folks have the context and they're not just going off of assumptions? I think the communication piece, we can use the technology to narrow this communication gap in so many wonderful ways. And it doesn't have to actually be really fancy. It doesn't have to be really fancy. Like, something as simple as having a 30-minute stand-up at the beginning of the week where people sort of just share, okay, this is what we're doing. I have a doctor's appointment on Tuesday, whatever it is, right? That can go a long way toward streamlining some of these things for teams.
Yeah.
I think it's important. We're almost out of time, which is like crazy and hard to, I know. I mean, talk about balance and blend. I need that, right? And when this happens, I always think, should we make the show a little bit longer? Because
I could talk forever, sure.
Well, it's crazy because we got to hold to it with this. Anyway, we got a question that came in. Lisa asked, I would love to share this with my team. I see that it is being recorded. How can I share this with them? Absolutely. All of our episodes of every show from the get-go of the nonprofit show are being recorded and have been edited. You can find those on the American Nonprofit Academy.com website, the nonprofitshow.com. And absolutely. It's free and you can always get back to what it is that we are talking about, because we talk about something different every day. But I want to kind of go back to, I've got a question about how do we know when we are being mindful with technology? And then it's kind of like a two-part question, because are we going to continue to develop this when we get the all clear and the pandemic is not as present in our lives? So say late fall of 2021, and it's like, okay, now we're going back to our offices and all this. What do you think is going to happen, and how are we going to navigate that?
Absolutely. So great question. So I'll work backwards. So in terms of what my prediction, in terms of what we might see, my sense is that we're going to have a hybrid approach, right? I think there are going to be some organizations that are going to be heavily relying on the efficiencies they've gained by actually working remotely. And so for many of those organizations, they're going to continue to do that. But I imagine that for lots of organizations, particularly those that are doing essential frontline work, that we're going to have some type of hybrid approach. But the same principles apply. And even if we were to all go back to the office, after quote unquote the pandemic is over, we're still facing the same challenges, because the role that technology plays in our lives isn't changing anytime soon. And one of the reasons for that is, the profit motive for companies like a Facebook or an Apple or a Google. Facebook makes almost 100% of their revenue from ads, which means that their incentive is to capture and to keep your attention, right? Similarly with Google, they make about 80+% of their revenue from ads. So there's a profit motive involved in this. They've invested heavily in keeping us connected to our technology. So it's partly we actually need it as just functioning in today's world, but part of it is like we have these external factors that are contributing to this. So to your question about how do we know if we are balanced in terms of our tech life and our work life? Well, there are a few things that I would say that are good hallmarks or indicators if you're balanced or not. The first is if you're clear about your intention, right? So if you wake up in the morning and you're clear about, what your intended outcome is for your day or for your week, you're clear about that. That's a good start. You have priorities that are actually aligned with that clear intention. That's an even better start. You're investing your time that's actually aligned with achieving those priorities. In other words, your calendar actually reflects, that if you say you want to be available for your partner, for your children, that time is actually on your calendar. If you say that you're working on that annual report, the time to actually draft and to write that, to connect with donors, whatever it might be, those things are actually on your calendar. You're able to say yes and say no based on how things align or not with your priorities and calendar. Again, you could probably use the rules of engagement as a way to help you to say yes and no appropriately, right? So those are all indications. And then the last thing I would say when it comes to this technology piece, that you're actually responsive, right, with your technology. In other words, you're using your technology to help facilitate achieving your goals and your priorities, as opposed to reacting to what the prompts or the dings, the pings, and notifications, all those things are telling you to do, right? You're being responsive and you're using technology to help push your agenda as opposed to you responding to other people's agenda when it comes through your Facebook message or your email or whatever it might be.
Such great,
Wow.
yeah, such great advice. Now, you mentioned an assessment. Talk to us about what that assessment entails and where we can find it. I'm sure it's on your website, but I would love to know a little bit more about what you've created.
Absolutely. So it's a free workbook, and part of this workbook, it walks through the process of getting clarity about your vision, your current vision or intention, your priorities that are actually aligned with that. And then there's an assessment that actually helps you to get what I call your digital wellness score, your tech life balance score.
Cool.
And based on that tech life balance score, you understand where you are on the spectrum, and you have some reflection questions to help you figure out what do you do next based on that. So if you go to mindfultechie.com/free, you can get more information about that. You can download it. It's absolutely free, but that's mindfultechie.com/free. Get access to this work-life balance workbook, and it includes this assessment that I was referring to.
I'm definitely going to check that out.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I had a client, I do executive coaching, and she was saying how she really uses that drive time between work and home to talk to her family. But then she gets home and she has like no me time, And I said, okay, well, I'm going to challenge you that you actually set your phone down or you listen to a podcast or something that's for you, but don't take a phone call. Don't make a phone call. Don't use that drive time as work time or connection time. Use it for yourself, And I said, and I'm going to challenge you even further that every time you drive to and from work is to take a different route, right? So that you are present and you are mindful and that you don't stay in the point A to B. Like that's constantly what we
Autopilot.
Yeah. Take
Autopilot,
another route, be present, notice your surroundings, and take in that drive just for you.
Yeah.
I love that. For many of us, we have substituted our commute time at home to do more work and to take on more personal responsibilities.
Right.
I urge people to say, like, this is your time. Like, you reclaim that time for yourself and use it to pour into yourself. Because if you're not filled up, you can't give to other people. Right? You can't give to your work. You can't give to your family and friends. You can't give your best. So reclaim your commute time at the top of your day and at the end of your day to do something for you.
That's right.
I love it. Meico Marquette Whitlock. Wow, this has been great. I needed to hear this today. Yeah. I am so appreciative. I mean, I need to hear this every day, but I really needed to hear this today. So I witness to you. Thank you very, very much. The mindfultechie.com. I love it. I love it. Love it. I love the spin and the grace with which you work. It's just fabulous. And so check him out. Again, I'm Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. I've been joined by the nonprofit nerd herself, Jarrett Ransom, the amazing, amazing mind that we are so fortunate to have on this show. Hey, we want to invite everybody. We're just going to be offering this for a kind of a short period of time because both of us are pretty much booked up. Executive coaching by the hour. Check us out. Again, we want to thank our nonprofit show sponsors. Without you, we would not have Meico on and have these amazing conversations that we have every day. So we have a tremendous amount of gratitude for our sponsors, and we hope that you give them a shout out. Hey, another great episode, an amazing way to start my day. I know for many of you watching this, it might be the end of your day, the middle of your day, depending on where you are. But thank you so, so very much. And as we do every day, we like to remind everybody to stay well so you can do well. We'll see you back here tomorrow, everybody.